Do we have a question over here, and I'll come to you and then to you?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a quick comment, and I'm going to try and stay brief, about the first question about the Who song. I'm going to make my own Who song, The Kids Are Alright. I think it's very short-sighted. It's a discourse we hear all the time. Our generation, 1960s, we were idealists, we wanted to change the world, and you little brats want to go into banking and all you think about is yourself. And I think you lose track in that comparison. This is something that I talk about a lot. You forget some things. I don't make a lot of money. My friends who are teachers make even less money than I do. I stopped a PhD in history after a few months when I realized the difficulty my friends were experiencing in getting tenured professorships, because universities are completely full of baby boomers and they're never going to leave. Same thing for orchestra, same thing for journalism. And so, next to that, aside of that, you also have to speak about music, the Beatles, etc., who keep filling up stadiums. There's never been, in the digital age, there's never been as much music produced, exchanged, listened to, and some of it is good, some of it can compete with the Beatles and the Who. And I think it's harder for us to have a social agenda in our life path, because it's becoming almost impossible to choose to be a teacher, to choose to be a professor. It's becoming harder and harder. And I think it's fascinating to see that top-ranking diplomats, university professors, journalists, experienced journalists, were completely taken by surprise by things like the Arab Spring. They never saw it, that the youth were concerned by stuff. You don't need to be a journalist to be concerned. There's movements all the time. The baby boomers didn't. We care differently. We can't dedicate our lives to caring because you can't afford it anymore. And we don't have long hair and flowers and flashy clothes to do it. We do it discreetly, but we do it.
That's a very fair comment. Question over here.
Thank you for a very interesting discussion. I have a question to Mr. Stora. Don't you think that the very concept of elite is vicious, discriminatory, and anti-libertarian, that further aggravates the situation in the world? And don't you think that some sort of paradigm changes or paradigm shift is needed, especially in terms of disentangling the, let's say, notion or concept of elite from the access to wealth? Thank you.
Je partage, I share your views on that. Je partage votre avis. Le terme d'élite peut paraître discriminant, ou en tout cas péjoratif. Mais si on résume un peu la réflexion aujourd'hui, il faut repartir des notions, des définitions toujours. Je crois que c'est très important. Qu'est-ce que c'est qu'une élite? C'est pas une puissance autoritaire. Repartons. Qu'est-ce que c'était que l'aristocratie dans la Grèce antique? Aristocratie. Les aristoïdes. C'est les meilleurs. Le pouvoir est exercé, parce que notre démocratie, elle découle directement, même si elle est totalement différente aujourd'hui. Les grands principes sur lesquels nous vivons viennent de la Grèce antique. Et donc les aristoïdes, c'était les meilleurs. Le pouvoir, les différents pouvoirs dans la société sont donnés aux gens les plus compétents. La notion de compétence n'est pas péjorative. Et le système, la notion d'élite ensuite, peut-être qu'on va avoir une connotation péjorative, mais dans un système politique, il est nécessaire de l'organiser en fonction de critères qui soient les plus justes possibles. Et donc, nos démocraties viennent du fait qu'on a considéré que le pouvoir ne devait pas être donné en fonction de la naissance, en fonction de privilèges hérités, en fonction d'une capacité à prendre des décisions conformes à l'intérêt général, conformes à l'intérêt d'une société, ou peu importe. Donc, une démocratie ne se passe pas du pouvoir. Je crois que c'est là qu'il faut... Il existe toujours. Le pouvoir ne disparaît pas avec la notion de démocratie, où la fonction de direction, de leader, de dirigeant, elle reste vivace dans un système politique démocratique. La question, c'est de savoir d'où provient la légitimité de l'exercice de cette fonction. Et la démocratie considère qu'elle ne dénie pas, elle ne refuse pas, elle ne méprise pas le pouvoir ou la direction. Au contraire, elle dit que celui qui dirige parce qu'il est légitime à prendre des décisions. Et toute la question, c'est d'organiser un système qui favorise à la fois des gens qui puissent changer de position au cours de leur vie, par leur expérience, par leur capacité à démontrer un enthousiasme, une implication dans leur travail, et donc à changer de position au cours de leur vie. Et tout l'enjeu d'une démocratie, c'est de faire en sorte que les parents qui exercent une position dans une société, les générations futures, ne soient pas obligés en permanence à reproduire les positions sociales héritées. Et donc, c'est tout l'enjeu, comme si on prenait la métaphore du corps, c'est la respiration, c'est la circulation, et c'est la diversification des lieux de décision et des prescripteurs de sang. Une élite, pour moi, des élites, ce sont des gens qui occupent des fonctions de direction, qui prescrivent le sens d'une société, qui sont capables d'orienter une société dans un sens particulier, mais bien sûr, ils sont plusieurs, ils sont issus de groupes différents, en compétition, et en fait, se voient toujours en compétition avec des nouveaux postulants. Donc pour moi, la question de l'élite n'est pas une question péjorative, n'est pas un terme péjoratif, c'est toute la question de la formation, ce qu'on a évoqué, des élites, et de la diversification du vivier pour recruter ceux qui sont capables de décider, d'impulser, de donner une énergie, un dynamisme à une société.
If I could just respond very briefly to the comment that was made, are we in need of a new paradigm shift? I think the answer is yes. And I'd like to say to the implied criticism that my analysis of this was very old Labour and rather old hat, that I've taken quite an inspiration from this book, which is really being widely commented on in the UK by an ex-advisor to Margaret Thatcher, Ferdinand Mount, somebody from the traditional elite, who's written an extraordinarily pertinent criticism of what he calls the new few. This is not an analysis coming from the dinosaurial left, it's an analysis that is also coming from the political right. Mount says there is at least these issues are now on the agenda where they weren't before. I took a quote from one page of the book. It's now an open season for reform. So the issue is alive and kicking, and whether there will be a fresh paradigm or in the future will tell.
It's more like manipulative tool. It's like carrot for masses to keep people maybe quiet and busy, to work hard. And if you work hard, then you are good, and you move up. And I don't know, there should be some kind of ceiling. How many management do we need? How many doctors do we need? How many professors do we need? And I think it's not about upward mobility, it's about building society where people have respect. You know, maybe janitor wants to be janitor, he doesn't want to be professor, but he needs to be respected in society. And I believe that when we talk about paradigm shift, for me it will be society where everybody are respected.
I think that's an excellent point. When we're talking about elites, it implies a movement from the bottom all the way up to the top, but what is necessary perhaps is the foundation of a strong and respected, forceful middle class first, and maybe perhaps that's a precondition before we can really talk about any form of real social mobility, where an elite is a constantly revolving door. We have one question.
James Sakheli, I'm going to hear more from დიდი მადლობა ასეთ საინტერესო მოხსენებისთვის. მე არ ევროპის პირობებზე ამ პერიოდში ძალიან ბევრი საინტერესო ადამიანი ჩამოვიდა. პირველ რიგში დიდი მადლობას მოგიხდით ამისათვის. რაც შეეხება ახალ დეფინიციებს, სოციალური ტრანსფორმაცია და სოციალური მობილურობა, რომელიც გაჟღერდა ამ ოთახში ევროპის სახში, ამ ქუჩაზე დღეს, ჩემთვის პირველად გავიგე ეს დეფინიციები, ეს არადროს გამიგია ცხოვრებაში და მინდა ჩემი კომენტარი გამოთქვა ამის შესახებ. მე მიმაჩნია, რომ ელიტა აუცილებლად უნდა არსებობდეს, რომ ერი შენარჩუნდეს, ძლიერი ელიტა უნდა არსებობდეს ყველა საზოგადოებაში, რათა ერი შენარჩუნდეს, ერმა უნდა შენარჩუნოს თავის თვით არსებობა, რომ ის არ გაქრეს. მეორედაც შეეხება საქართველოში ერთი კვირის წინ მოხდა ძალიან აქტუალური მოვლენა. საქართველოს პარლამენტი გადადის სხვა ქალაქში, 4 საათის სავალ ქალაქში, ქუთაისში. და ჩვენმა საჯარო მოხელეებმა გამოთქვეს, რომ ეს არის აუცილებელი, დეცენტრალიზაცია მოხდეს თბილისიდან გადავიდნენ საჯარო მოხელეები, ორგანოები, ძირითადი საპარლამენტო ორგანო გადავიდეს მაგალითად ქალაქში. მე მაგალითად მიმაჩნია, რომ ესეც სოციალური მოგზაურობის დეფინიციას ასოცირებს. ასევე მე ესე დავინახეთ ეს სამწუთას ამ დისკუსიაზე, რომ სოციალური მოგზაურობა არის ისაც რომ ამ დღეებში საქართველოში ჩამოვიდნენ ამდენი ევროპელი მოღვაწეები, ასეთ საინტერესო დისკუსიები გავარდეს, წარმომადგენლები არიან ევროკავშირიდან, სხვა ქვეყნებიდან, ეგვიპტიდან და ასე შემდეგ, ასე რომ ლორდთა პალატის წარმომადგენლები ინგლისიდან, ესაც სოციალური მობილურობა არის, რომ ჩვენ კარი გვიხსნება ზუსტად ევროპის სოციალურ მობილურობაში. დიდი მადლობა კომენტარისთვის.
One more question here. I think we have time for a couple more.
The need for a society to have an elite, I don't really understand. Like every 5,000 of history show us one thing: societies with no potent elites go down the drain. So the question is not whether or not the whole concept of elite should be there. The idea is, how are they renewed? Are they endogamous? Are they gerontocratic? How are they formed? What's happening exactly in that? I would argue on most of the planet, 200 years ago, elites came from blood. 100 years ago, many of them in the Western world at least, came from money. I go to some of the global fora where one comes across the new global elite that is, coming into being. Davos for being one of those fora. And what I see there is money is no longer the deciding factor. It simply isn't. Yes, there is Bill Gates and there are a number of very wealthy people around the table. But the truth is that half the people in Davos are academics, scientists, journalists. They're not people who live with a lot of money. They simply aren't. And so, for me, the question today, I think we're going in the right direction. But it's coming down to two things as far as I see it. Education, and one thing that is, I think, becoming really, really important these days is the ability to have a conceptual, a sophisticated intellectual conversation in English. That is what is defining elites today in the world. And I would like to know, as far as I'm concerned, this is a good thing, because many of the countries that have been at the helm of global development up to now have been so with an old way of defining the elite, very, again, endogamous, gerontocratic, etc. And those countries are often very bad at speaking proper English. So I think this is a good thing.
Well, I think human rights and social mobility are important and come first. But I'm really into environmentalism and global warming and climate change. And young people, like my friend over here said, we can't afford idealism these days. But I see it as our planet cannot afford our economic system for much longer. So how do we change education to give a bigger voice to environmental elites who are focused on conserving resources, sustainability, and biodiversity?
Thank you. I think you'll find 3 people nodding in agreement here. And another question? The advancement to whatever we want to call the elite, however, difficult that phrase is, and it's a process we're seeing in Georgia, in the United States, in France, Egypt certainly, and one that we all continue to struggle with. So I'd like to thank my panelists for enlightening us with their views and their experiences and the particular conditions of their home countries. And I'm sorry if we couldn't add a little bit more expertise to the situation in Georgia today, but maybe we'll wait for next year. We'll all study and do our homework. Thank you very much.